purpose of strategic planning is to create a set of priorities that enable us to act courageously and responsibly today to advance toward the future with a great expression of God's work in the world, intentional effort to seek the inspiration and guidance of the Holy Spirit in order to discern the will of God as we move into the future. But that for me is about as good as anything I've ever read. I love the fact that there is in there the marriage of the supernatural and the strategic, and so that's a really big part of this. Just a couple of examples. The second one there is my favorite. Wayne Gretzky. There's some Canadians here, aren't there? One of your heroes. He says that his success, his ability to be a great ice hockey player is learning to skate to where the puck will be. And it's pretty much the only game where you're running to a puck that's deflected off another surface. And that's life. That's such a brilliant description of life. You cannot work out exactly what's going to happen in the future, but if you can start to read, as it were, where things are going, that's the big deal. And of course that's what's made him amazing and great at his sport. And the other illustration I have up there it comes from the story of Joshua. And Joshua, of course, at the beginning of the book of Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Today I've appointed you in the sight of all the people. And Joshua now picks up the assignment to lead the people into the promised land. And there are three elements to this that I've always thought were really significant. Chapter 3, verse 1, it says, Joshua rose early. And I believe that that's a picture of Joshua positioning his soul. And if you're anything like me, I sometimes drive my wife mad with this, but if we're getting a plane at 5 o'clock in the morning, I set about 3 alarms. I set both iPhones and the one by the bed, and that has 2 alarms on it, kind of a thing. And yet usually I wake up before any of the alarms go off. Why? Because you position your soul. I don't know how it works. I never have. We have a member of our team who never sets an alarm. He goes on a missions trip at 4 in the morning and he doesn't set an alarm, and he just wakes up. And I've never had enough faith to live like that. But my feeling with Joshua, it's like he positioned his soul for tomorrow. He knew that something was happening, and so he rose early. He got up early. Everything about his mind, will, and his emotions was set on this next stage of his life. And I think that's a great place to start with strategy, with strategic planning, with change management, with where we're going, developing a vision. It's like we have to position our soul first, the mind, will, and emotions. And then in verse 5 of chapter 3, it says, Joshua stands and says, sanctify yourselves, set yourselves apart, which really is this statement of saying, make yourselves holy, position yourselves separate from all the other things of life that are going on, because I want you to make sure that you see what great wonders the Lord will do among you. And we sometimes have to do that. We have to just sometimes separate ourselves. And we'll do that on Thursday morning here with the intercessors as part of this workshop, where it's really just position yourselves just in relationship with God. For this moment, nothing else matters. Expose yourself, open yourself up to God himself, and so that you don't miss everything he's about to do. And if you're anything like me, sometimes I'm so caught up in the business of life that I'll miss that thing that that God has just done, and I'll pass over it, and yet it was extraordinary if I had the eyes to see it. And then finally in Joshua, at the end of that chapter, basically you've got this picture of Joshua going through, and he's, God's anointed Joshua. Joshua tells the priests, and then the priests lead the people, and the people are told, wait until the priests stand with their feet in the edge of the water, and at that moment in time you'll kind of know what to do. So strategy has this soul context to it. It has the spiritual context, and it has the physical context. If those people hadn't got up and hadn't followed the priests, if the priests hadn't picked up the ark, if they hadn't all moved to exactly that position, stood on the edge of the water with their feet just touching the edge of the water, then they wouldn't have got across. I know it's totally simple, but they had to do something. No matter how incredible the supernatural breakthrough was in parting the waters, the people still physically had to do something. They could have sat there and watched it. It's like, it's a great water show. It's amazing. How incredible. But if they hadn't done something. So for me, there's 3 elements to strategy, and we need to engage every part of us with that. So, why strategic planning? Where does that fit into this world that we're all a part of? And doesn't it sound like an incredibly kind of worldly, secular, Fortune 500 phrase? Well, strategy is actually the art of being a general. And if you've had anything to do with this house and listened for any length of time, you will probably have heard Bill at some stage talk about, the great generals that have gone before. When I was in School of Ministry, we read God's Generals 1, which is just this great book. And I remember Bill standing there and saying, there's the Bible, and there's God's Generals, and then there's all other books. Because for him, the great men and women, the revivalists who've gone before, they're keys to how we live, and so many lessons that draw from that. Well, the strategy comes from the word strategos, which was actually a word that was around the same time as apostolos. And the strategos were, what they did in a Roman city is they would have 10 tribes, and each tribe would have territory in a city, and each tribal leader was called a strategos. And their job was strategically to protect that city and to advance the borders and the boundaries of that city. So strategy is really the art of being a general. You can approach strategic planning. I know people who approach it from a completely military point of view. I've got textbooks that are written by people who were, out in the desert with the forces, and there's so much to learn from the military. So strategy is the art of being a general. I believe that we're to raise up generals, who are going to take revival and are going to impact this world, expand territory, defend what we already have, and pass it on to the next generation. So, the art of being a general is a good way of describing it. And then, there's this divine tension, I believe, that we all live with, and that is that, I'll cover it in some other ways later as well, but I often hear people who say, we don't plan, we're led by the Spirit. Well, that's just crazy to me. That's just a nonsense phrase. We're to co-labor with God. The people of Israel I just talked about, they could have sat on their butts and done nothing. They wouldn't have got into the promised land. It doesn't matter what God does. We have to partner, and there's the part that we have to do. When Moses smashed the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments, the second time that they're written on, Moses carved them out of the rock. God says, you be up here by tomorrow morning and bring with you 2 tablets. The first tablets, it would appear, God carved and wrote on with his finger. But the second tablets, Moses had to carve them and God wrote on those. So there's always is that co-laboring, that divine tension, and it comes up in lots of areas of life. So for me, strategic planning, calling it apostolic strategic planning or supernatural strategic planning, it is deliberately saying we have to bring these 2 elements together. The secular world out there is using a lot of our stuff. There's no question about it, and we just need to get some of our stuff back and learn to use it. So